This is Seymour Rocks reporting from Down Under. What I'm pointing out is going to be a little bit delicate, not least because we will live in a world of binary, dualistic thinking, where only one thing can be true at any one time, and even that is often linked with some agenda of the elite, usually something that doubles down on the very thing that caused the problem in the first place. So just take this from Paul Beckwith.
Of CO2 in the atmosphere. So we need to apply and deploy carbon dioxide removal technologies. And I've talked about that in separate videos, and I'll talk about it a lot in future videos. But we need to actively remove carbon from the atmosphere, mostly CO2, but also things like methane, which is on an accelerated rise also. So carbon dioxide removal, we need to get down to 350 or even 300 parts per million to stabilize our climate. So that's leg two of the three-legged bar stool. And the third thing that we need to do is we need to deploy solar radiation management technologies, so SRM, in order to basically either block some of the sunlight to cool the Arctic. If we let the Arctic...
I've listened to Paul for quite a while over the years, decreasingly so actually, because I'm very well aware of his arguments, and so I don't need to listen to every new video that he produces. So he has a three-legged bar stool which he recommends of greenhouse gas emission, CO2 removal, and geoengineering. But this is the first time I've heard Paul specifically mention solar radiation management. That means he wants to block out the sun. So that, to me, adds up to a mad scientist with a gleam in his eye who wants to destroy the world in order to save it. And to me, that's the very definition of insanity. You just have to have watched the now largely suppressed BBC documentary on global dimming to see what the consequences of blotting out the sun are. Most people will be too young to remember the huge famines in Africa, the Horn of Africa, during the late 1970s and 1980s, but I remember that well. Blot out the sun and you're very likely to kill off an undetermined number of people in the tropics, something that has already been admitted to by geoengineer David Keith, and you can find that video. There's a large element in all of this about reinvigorating the Western economy by reviving colonialism, some sort of fourth industrial revolution. So according to this vision, we can save the planet by driving an electric car, by sending little boys in the Congo to work in the cadmium mines for the huge batteries that they require. Or we can save the planet by destroying it and condemn thousands or millions of people to starvation in countries that mean less than nothing to most people in the West, who simply want to maintain their precious living standards, and I'm talking most of all of the psychopaths of the 1%. So it all comes down to a matter of ethics for me. Paul Beckwith may be correct, but is he right? All the evidence points to the changes he's talking about, and I have to say, like with Guy McPherson, I have a debt of gratitude to Paul. Without him, I would not have a lot of the understanding of abrupt climate change and its effects that I have today. So does that mean that I should stop there and stick with the messenger even where I violently disagree with a major part of what he's saying? I think not. So there's more here. and this is going to be quite difficult to say because it runs the risk of me being misconstrued, which is almost inevitable. I've been a watcher of all of this for 8 years, and I've been an Arctic watcher for a lot of that, so I can't argue with much of the facts that Paul gives. It's the what are we going to do part that where we part company. I think that at the very least human civilization is headed for near-term collapse. However, there are many reasons for the demise of civilization, not just one, and so some of the and same with some of the solutions. In addition to being morally reprehensible in my mind for the reasons that I've just sort of been mentioning, it also risks making other aspects of the human condition much, much worse. However much I agree about the dangers of abrupt climate change, scientific reductionism ensures that so much is left out of the equation. So one thing that comes to mind is the effects on life in the ocean from Fukushima and accumulating radiation. So that's a taboo subject. And then there's another taboo subject. There's the perennial elephant in the room. The very solar radiation management that Beckwith is touting. There is every indication that far from being just a pipe dream of mad scientists, this is an actuality that has been going on for years. So as real as I think the dangers from abrupt climate change are, I have to be the first to admit that these are theories. So much has happened already that we can be fairly confident in our theories true, but they are still theories. So we will only really know the eventuality, the true state of affairs, when we look in the rear vision mirror. But by then, of course, we might be on our way out. In fact, we're already on our way out. So there are things that are actual and now and being swept under the carpet conspicuously by some of the abrupt climate change folk themselves. And I just want to give one small example of a conversation that my partner Pam and I recorded on a walk yesterday. We made some...
Well, as you know, I've had this sort of theory from observing the river and the like that our soils are just becoming desiccated. And I just got back from a walk with you, and you had something very important, a very important observation about this. So can you just tell us what you were saying?
What I have noticed in the years that I've lived in the Hutt Valley and walked along the river embankment is that after heavy rain, at any time of year, when I've walked along the embankment, there are always a lot of earthworms washed out of the grassy banks, and they end up on the sealed walking tracks. And I mean, I've noticed them, and lots of them get squashed. Sometimes I actually pick them up and put them back on the grass so they can burrow back into the earth. But of late, I have noticed after heavy rain, and we've had quite heavy rain recently, that I'm not seeing that. Those worms are not there along the path as they used to be. And I thought about that in the last couple of days. And it occurred to me, well, hang on, this is the cold season. So if I'm not seeing them now, what's it going to be like in summer when it gets really dry? So it's just one little observation that adds to a sense of a drying out of our groundwater. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that anecdotal evidence is so important because I don't really believe that the research is going on But you've noticed something else, and this is sort of related to climatic things, and that's just, I mean, if I put the microphone on what's happening in the garden right now, you wouldn't think so, but there seems to have been a fall off in the number of birds, and you came up with quite a credible reason for that.
Yes, I think there's a fall off. I'm seeing it in the number of common garden birds, and it's related to different things, I would say, including a kind of a shift in the seasons. So, food that would be available for them at certain times isn't there. If the ground is drying out and the worms are harder to get, then that's going to affect, birds like the blackbirds and thrushes that dig those worms up. And I mean, I'm not even looking at the predator issue. That's going on all the time in the background.
Here is a desiccation of our soils that may well be from the injection of particulates into the atmosphere. I've been observing this for a while, and yeah, I need some explanations. So can you imagine a world without worms or without bees? Maybe some humans from the elite will continue to live some sort of half-life without the things that nourish us and provide the prerequisites for our life on the planet. In the meantime, I've seen signs that the sort of things Beckwith is touting is already going on in the Arctic and elsewhere, and they're not working. Everything is heating quickly, more quickly than anyone would have guessed, with or without his beloved solar radiation management. So is it moral and ethical for some godless scientist or politician to decide which groups of humans are going to live and who is going to die? How is that even remotely ethical? The long and short of it is we've reached a point in our devolution that we are seeing the law of karma working itself out, and it is time to accept that this is the case and to start to prepare for what fate has in store for us. As my friend Margot says, get your spiritual house in order. It's only godless psychopaths racked with fear of their own demise that require solutions that make everything worse than it already is, worse than the already terrible predicament that we are in, and it is a predicament, and are willing to kill others to save their own worthless lives. I have a word to describe this: satanic. Or to put it in a more secular way, to quote someone I know, we're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't.